Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on today's program. Today, I am honored, truly, to the level of being at a personal level to have known this wonderful individual as an undergraduate who showed huge amount of curiosity, huge amount of interest, always willing to learn more, always willing to go to the next level, being able to ask questions, not only for himself, but he was also helping and mentoring others throughout his work as an undergraduate. Now today he is a newly minted PhD. I'd like to congratulate him on that. Dr. Felix Zuniga, he is an educational doctor, and he is now the campus engagement partner at the California State University Office of the Chancellor. I've known Felix, his beautiful wife Martha, and recently also their 7-year-old son, Felix Mateo Zuniga. And I've seen him and his lovely wife evolve to the level where they were go-getters from the from the day one. They were always present, always wanting to learn more, and always looking to meet other individuals and absorb their knowledge, which was the reason for these meetings that went on. So I could sit here and talk all day about you, Felix, but I applaud what you're doing so far. But this program is called Kindergarten to PhD, The Road Less Traveled, as I remember that other title as well. Felix, what were you like when you were in kindergarten?
Oh, well, thank you, Armando, first of all, for having us here, having me here. And I say us, I'm talking about my family, right? Because this is about us as a group. Going back to kindergarten, I was born in LA. Let's go back a little bit. I was born in LA. And when I was very young, my father got sick from the smog. You remember how bad the smog was in Los Angeles in the 70s, right?
Horrible.
And so we ended up having to leave Los Angeles. He was working for the city of LA. And we moved to a little town where I had an aunt in Clifton, Arizona. It was a mining town in the middle of nowhere between Phoenix and New Mexico, off of the 60 out there, if you know the area. But we started where like it was one school that was from K through 12, right, for the whole city. So everybody went there, right? My two older brothers went to the same school that I did, and I was fortunate enough to start school with my cousin, who was about the same age as me, Melissa. And my aunt lived literally down the hill and across the street from the school, right, across the train tracks. And so I think back at that time, and it was awesome because I don't remember LA too much, but as a 5-year-old or 4-year-old, because I think I started when I was 4 over there, you know, we used to go play on the train tracks, go to the river, you know, by ourselves, right? Running around the hills and the mountains, throwing rocks at whatever, you know. And I think like, man, I wouldn't take my eyes off my kid for a second, let alone what I was doing at that age, right? But it was good, you know, learning about school. I remember for some reason, like my dad and I used to drop off my cousin at school, and then we would go to the library or go do something else. And I don't know if it was because we had just gotten there. Maybe I wasn't old enough to start school. But that was a valuable time that I remember spending some time with my father, you know, reading, getting an appreciation of books. My dad's always had a book in his hand as long as I've known him. And, you know, I went to kindergarten and first grade there. It was cool, very normal. And then a flood hit the town that we lived in. It was like 100 years flood, and it basically wiped out the city. I don't know if the city's ever recovered from that. The house that we lived in, you know, it was actually a trailer that was near the river, got washed away. I lost all my toys. I think I only had my bike was like the one thing that I had left. And after that event happened, my family relocated, right? My mom and dad, we moved up to Victorville, California, which is up in the high desert. And, you know, there's no chance of floods in Victorville, if you know Victorville, because it's in the desert between...
No chance of water either.
Between LA and Las Vegas, right, is Victorville. And when we moved there, it was like 1984. And there was only George Air Force Base and like a handful of stores, you know, there was nothing there.
Right.
And so I started second grade at Parkview Elementary. I was a Parkview Panther. And what I remember about those elementary years was I moved schools a lot. And it wasn't because we moved locations as a family. I lived in a part of the city that was unincorporated. And so I think the school district didn't know what to do with the kids there, right? Because we didn't have enough to have our own school. So we ended up being moved. In second grade, I was at Parkview. At third grade, I was at Village. In fourth grade, I was at Liberty, so the same group of kids got moved around with all these other kids, but we didn't have any kind of stability with a school. And so it wasn't until fourth grade that we kind of landed in a newer school where, it was all portables, but it was our school. And so fourth, fifth, and sixth was in one location. When you got to junior high, there was only 2 junior highs in the city at that time. And the one I went to, Hook Junior High, was kind of like a magnet for all those elementary schools I went to. So I got to see a lot of those students that I went to school with from second, third, and fourth, and
different places all of a sudden.
Exactly. And then when I got to high school, it was actually the same because some of those other schools had gone to the other junior high. So then you get to see people, right? And so it gave me a valuable tool in networking and getting to meet people and make new friends pretty fast, right? Which is very valuable in today's world, right? Getting to know and meet people. And so, by the time I got done with high school, some key events that happened for me was, I was looking at the military because a lot of my friends were looking at the military, just like it happens now, where military recruits, they're on the high school campuses more than the colleges are, right? And my dad told me no, right? He was in the military, he was in the Army, so I thought in my mind, like, well, maybe I should take this path too. And he stopped me and he said, no, you don't need to be in the military. He said I needed to for the GI Bill. It was the only way for him to get some college. And he said, there's plenty of other ways to pay for it now, that you don't have to do that. And, when I asked why or pushed back, he just said, it's not an army for your people, for our people. It's a different world, so he obviously knew more than I did at that time, right? And we've talked about this of not knowing what you don't know, but it was one of the few times where he was never really too tough on us as far as what we had to do, or very directive. It was more like a goalie, or soccer, like kicking it back into play kind of thing, like keeping the ball in play, right? Just stay within this area. And so I then turned to the local community college. Victor Valley College was where I was going to go because that's where everybody else I knew went, right? And that was the second time he said no. He said, no, you've been accepted to CSU San Bernardino. You'll go there. It's a 4-year university. You don't need to go to the community college. He said, nothing wrong with that, but you've been accepted here. You should go there. And I remember telling him, well, I don't know anybody over there. And his response was, well, it doesn't matter. You'll make friends, And so, I always look back and reflect, and it's like, yeah, it's true. And maybe he knew something about me that I didn't know back then. And I remember moving into college, because we joke about it now, when my little sister moved into college, it was a different feeling and story. And was what I saw from my family, my mom and dad drove her to college and stayed nearby, and she went to Loyola Marymount. And, it was a more difficult separation for me. When I was moving into college, I had already been living away from home. For the summers, I would go stay with my brother, and he put me to work. And I thank Philip, because he worked my butt off because he wanted me to appreciate college, right? And it was a valuable lesson that he taught me what hard work can do, right? And so I used to go to the Arizona summers and work 2 jobs. I'd wake up at the crack of dawn, and when I was done with the first job, he got me to go work at the movie theater, and I'd go to work till 2 in the morning and sleep for like 4 or 5 hours. And so then when I got to college and it was hard work, it wasn't as hard as what I knew would be the other thing for me if I stopped going to school, right? So there was a valuable lesson there.
I don't understand. You reminded me of something. I don't understand it when people tell me, school is hard. I said, I sit down in a library, I read, I take notes, which I love to read, So where do you get this idea where it's hard? I've never understood that one. I've gone to work in factories and places. That's hard work. I don't like that. And the last story, my father, when I was 13 or 14, I would work with him in different things. And then one day, my father took me aside and he says, I've been watching you your whole life for up to 13. You're basically lazy. He says, so you better be damn sure you go to college because work is not in your field. And I cracked up and I said, okay. But the day I graduated from college, I was already making more money than he was. And even though he had been working for almost 40 years. So I thought, okay. But in sort of, you reminded me of that story.
Definitely. And something interesting, Armando, going back to education with that, school was always pretty easy for me. But, looking back at it through, an educated person's eyes, a doctor's eyes, I see how the school failed me, in the sense that I was probably doing better than a lot of my peers as far as grades go, but I wasn't reaching my full potential. And I know that because, I wasn't pushed towards honors courses or, everything was kind of college prep at that time. And it was the beginning of the A through G talk, but no one had really talked about it in school. It was just like you had a pathway if you were going to graduate high school, and you had a pathway if you were going to go to college, right? And they weren't the same path. And I knew other people who landed in those honors courses and would talk about the difficulty of it. But as a young man in high school, why am I going to challenge myself with a harder class when I can get an A over here, And there was no one there to push for me to be in those classes, right? So I rose to the level that they put me in, right? And I remember in ninth grade, I was put in shop. I didn't know any different, right? I didn't know anything about tracking, so I took auto shop and different kinds of things like that. Whereas other people were taking, computer aided drafting or, computer science and things like that. I just thought like that's the way the chips fell kind of thing, right? And so, I appreciate the education I got, but I know it could have been better. And so I thank my dad for pushing me towards, the university, because I know, again, the opportunities there were going to be different from the local community college after the fact. Mm-hmm. And so landing at CSUSB, I go back to how I got there, right? I remember it was move-in day, and it was time for us to go down the hill, and my parents had a compadre that swung by the house for some reason, drop off something, and he says, okay, I'm on my way to LA. And they said, hey, you're going to drive by San Bernardino. Do you mind dropping this guy off at the university? And he said, yeah, sure, right? So he put me in the back of the truck, and they literally, like in the movies when they drop you off at college, you have 2 bags in your hands. That was me, right? I was like, all right, well, let me go figure out this place, right? So I moved into the dorms. My journey at CSUSB was awesome. I lived in the dorms for the first year, got involved in college, joined clubs, joined fraternity, got to experience it, learn about how not prepared I was for college, those first couple of quarters, because I don't remember, like in high school, I used to do my homework in class, right? And be done with it because they were still talking about other stuff. And so then I can go mess around after school, right? And as long as I had grades, it was okay. I didn't have any problems. But I remember that first paper I got back in my first like intro to business course or something, and it was bleeding red, right? Because of how bad my spelling and grammar, and I think I just had a stream of thought on paper and turned it in, and that was good enough for high school, but not for college, right? So I remember those first couple of years, like adjusting to college, reading. I always got a lot listening to the class, listening to the professor. I take notes to pay attention, but I wouldn't crack my books open all the time. Only if I needed to find something in there, and I would still do well, right? And I found myself telling myself that, oh, I'll go back and read that later, or I'll learn that later. I'll do good enough to get through this class right now. And that's something that, I kick myself in the butt now, right? Saying like, you never get that chance or that time again to go back and relearn something that you should have learned, in the first place, or you're allotting yourself this time to learn this subject, use it. Like you said, go to the library, engage in the book, talk about whatever you're learning with somebody else. And some of my best classes were when I had friends who were taking a class with me and we would compete for a grade. I love that competition part of, well, let's see who can, get a better grade on the test or the paper. And, I remember a philosophy class where, we had to immerse ourselves in these philosophers and read, Epicurus and Plato and Kant. And it's like, it was so foreign because I never heard any of that stuff in my life. And I remember writing a paper where I put a joke in to the paper, and the philosophy professor loved it so much that she had me read the paper in front of class, right? And who wants to listen to someone else's paper on philosophy, right? And her name was Beverly Gallo. Yeah. And so it was about, we had to take one philosopher and analyze it from the viewpoint of another, right? So that's how the paper was structured. And so I talked about somebody from Immanuel Kant's point of view. And so I remember the joke, just so you know what it is. Kant used to get in trouble with the Catholic Church because of his views just about the world, right? And so he would put a disclaimer in his paper saying, these are my views at the time that I wrote the book. And so then when they would come to interrogate him, he would say, I don't think that way anymore. That was the way I thought when I wrote that book, right? So I put that into my paper, right? At the very end, I said,
a disclaimer.
Disclaimer, these are my thoughts at the time, right? So when I read it in the class, I remember her like pounding on the desk, cracking up, and she's looking at the class like, don't you get it? Because no one else knew what the heck that was about. But that was college, Armando, and it was wonderful. I was at CSU San Bernardino. I did my undergrad, master's, and doctorate degrees there. It was home. I'd been there for 18 years before I left to join the CSU Chancellor's office where I'm at now. And now I work at the headquarters for the CSU, where, I see my role in working with technology teams, but more importantly, with the state of California, what the CSU does for the state of California. We educate nearly 500,000 students a year, employ 50,000 faculty and staff, the largest, public university in the United States, if not in the world. We were the largest online this past year because of coronavirus, COVID-19. Instantly, all our universities went online to teach, and it's been amazing to see what the university, the CSU, has been able to do to keep, California moving forward and keeping the world moving forward. And I know what education through the California State University did for me, and that's why I still find valuable contributions in what we do at the CSU for so many others who were like me and students coming after me.
Just a little bit of background, which you already know. California, in terms of gross income and base money budgets worldwide, what it would be the fourth most wealthy country in the world if it was a separate entity. And by the same token, its growth is dependent on its future generation. But if statistics serve me right, the majority of children now from the K-12 program in California are minority students, not necessarily just Latinos, but they also are a major portion. So, the demographics is changing tremendously. And if California wants to stay on top and evolve where it's going to have to educate its youth. So, what are your views, being where you are working in the California State University system and seeing where the future is going given the demographics?
I would say there's been a lot of strides, right? Everything's improved for, and I would challenge you to say minoritized students as opposed to minority students, because the majority in, K through 12, it's over 60% are Latinos now, and majority being Mexican or Mexican descent, and so there's a very specific demographic and group and history of students and how these students do, us being a part of that group,
Right.
And I think that the schools are still slow to change, right, as far as how they do what they do in the school with the students, how they interact with the students. going back to my high school, I remember going to see the counselor, and because I was on track to graduate, it was almost like, you're fine, I don't need to work with you, because they're working with all those students who weren't going to graduate. And it wasn't about getting me to college, it was about, you're fine, your track is fine, right? They picked my way for me, and I just kind of flowed through the pipeline, right? And so I was lucky that I had touch points and people. Like, I used to go sit in the career center early in the morning to play cards because we get to school early. And that lady, I don't remember her name, but I think she made sure that we all applied to college, right? Because she had a small, like, she opened the door for us, and it was somebody who was there, like, saying, hey, don't forget, CSU San Bernardino is going to be here in a couple of weeks. You should fill out this application form, right? And it was those people making those small, touch points that really make a difference. And I think overall, the school system is it's doing the best that it can, but I think it's still failing certain groups of students. And by failing, I mean, the equity and achievement level, right? The amount of students in the Latino community that are also achieving college degrees or college graduates is not the same equitable across different race and ethnicities, right? And that's where I think the school is still failing. We have more Latino graduates than we ever had, but that's by nature of population growth, not because the schools are doing better. They're actually doing worse.
I'm going to take that issue, take it to my personal level, having worked a little bit in the educational system, is that I always wonder how many brilliant young gals, young gentlemen who are brilliant in math, brilliant in science, brilliant in any given field, whether it be music, arts, whatever. And they're sort of not challenged to bring it up to the surface. And I think we all lose in the state, and we all lose on the planet, having these very gifted individuals. And then some kids are just, they look normal as heck, but then 20, 30 years later, all of a sudden, they just can outperform everyone. And the idea is we didn't necessarily serve them to be able to bring those gifts to the surface. So it isn't just, I won't put the challenge just on the schools. It's we all lose out, because these kids had formulas in their heads that if we had helped them to evolve them, we would all be living better on this planet.
I'll tell you the truth, Armando. I don't remember reading a book till I was 17, like a full, like picking up a book and reading it end to end.
From A to Z.
Right? A book of my choice, I should say, right? Because
Okay.
school, I mean, you read Frankenstein, you read other things, but I found myself, we read at the level of the slowest person in the class, and you know how low that can be, right? Because sometimes it was reading in class was the class, right? We'd sit there and take turns reading the book, right? And I think I picked up a Star Wars book or something. It was a paperback, and it was just so cool, right? I mean, a book opens up a whole new world to you, and ever since then, 17 years old, working a summer job in Arizona, on my breaks, I was reading the book, and I haven't put them down since. But imagine if I had started that when I was 4 or 5, what that would have changed for me, right?
Can't go back. Can't change things. But you can make sure that future individuals do pick up that book, do have access to that.
My son, Mateo, 7, we've been reading to him since before he was born, right? And he has a library, and I can't tell you how many thousands of books he has right now, more than probably maybe a local library might have, right? As far as at his fingertips. And then he picks up some of my books sometimes and starts asking me, well, what is this? And maybe about the Spanish conquest or something. I'll say, oh, well, that's not a book for kids right now. We'll talk about that later,
At your given time, the political science side. We're getting close to the ending of the show, unfortunately, but there's still some questions in there that I'd like to ask you. How many times did the idea of giving up cross your mind through your, I'll say, from your undergraduate up through even your PhD?
Easily, it happened frequently in the sense of I used to always feel like I was late to the game, like I missed an opportunity, and I used to kind of beat myself up about that. LSAC, for example, when I joined the Latino Scholastic Achievement Corporation, you took us to the Pomona College or Claremont colleges, and we were at Claremont McKenna, I think it was, and sitting there, being there on that campus, even though it was only 20 miles from where I was going to school, I'd never been to that campus or that world, and you explained to us what those colleges were. And while I was sitting there, I realized I had been accepted to that college out of high school, but I didn't know how to differentiate between Pomona College and Victor Valley College, right? That in my mind, they were the same thing. And so, kicked myself in the butt for a little while, thinking like, man, I could have gone here and I didn't. But it wasn't until later that I realized that I got just as good an education at my state college, working with the professors that I did, than maybe working with a graduate student at another university. And so I got top quality education, at my university. And I realized later, well, I'm just as good as those kids that went to school there.
Good. What's your advice for someone who is considering the idea of taking on the challenge of finishing their bachelor's degree program and going on to graduate school?
I would say, keep their mind open to the possibilities. I'll tell you when I decided to do a doctorate degree, because it's a decision that you have to make and hold on to, was sitting in the basement of USC for LSAC. You showed us the pipeline, for Latino doctorates, and how many college students like us were sitting in that room, and how few of us would make it to the end. I think it was 0.02% at that time, and actually, sadly, it hasn't changed much, right? That number. But I made the decision there that is something I can do. It'll just be a matter of where I do it and how I'm going to pay for it, right? Those are the kinds of things that were in my mind at that time. And you told us, don't pay for college. It'll find a way to get it done, right? And so it was making the decision then. I always knew I would do it. I actually was looking at going to Harvard Graduate School of Education with one of my mentors, Dr. Louis Rodriguez. He took us over there. We presented research at his university, and they were recruiting us, his proteges, right, to come to the campus. And I was looking at going, and we didn't go. And I say we because I was married, my wife Martha. Because at that time of like starting that program, we found out we were pregnant, and we weren't ready to move our family away from the rest of the family on both sides. And it was the first grandson, away from the family. Likewise, my mom had just been diagnosed with breast cancer. And so it was just like, there was too many reasons saying, don't go to the other side of the United States right now, right? And so Louis was actually in charge of the doctorate program at San Bernardino. So I said, well, it's not Harvard, but I can get, Harvard educated, so to speak, right, with my faculty here. And I don't regret it one bit, because it wasn't until my doctorate program where I actually had my first Latino faculty members, right? I had 4 Latino faculty members, at least 2 or 3 African-American faculty members, and many other great people. But it's the first time I saw myself in a faculty member. I'm talking all through a double bachelor's, master's, and getting to a doctorate level where I saw somebody that I could relate to in a different way. And I can't tell you the value of that.
I keep saying this, we're in the show, but the questions keep popping up. So please, if you can proceed with me a little bit longer. For individuals who may not know, a PhD is not strictly just to teach college. Right. It's could you tell us what else one does with a PhD?
Well, it opens you up to the world of knowledge and research, and being a doctor means that you're able to answer a question, a research question, the way a doctor would, right? And that can be in any field. So I'm not necessarily looking to teach at a college. I'm looking at educational leadership, and that can apply anywhere in K through 12, community college, and higher ed. I'm looking at it to advance in higher ed, right? To understand and understand the systems that we have in place and how they impact each other, and like the pipeline that we talked about and what that means for a society, right? And so being able to look at graduation statistics and not just say with the deficit perspective, well, that's those students and that's the way, it is because of, understanding the systems that create these outcomes and why and how we can change and dismantle them is really a lot of the training that I received, right? How to look at things with a critical eye. You hear a lot about critical race theory in the news lately and how they want to ban it, and it's like that's what opened up my eyes to the world that we live in and the systems that perpetuate injustice and keep things the way they are.
Well, again, I applaud what you're doing. I know that it takes a village. It isn't just you. You've gotten a lot of support from your beautiful wife, your family. Mateo also has supported you through the process. I can imagine that as well. And to close this interview, I'm only moved by what I observed many times, you lending yourself to the exposure of what else is out there. And as we kept visiting different locations, I want to thank ABC7 and Disney for providing the funding for the program where you were part of, and so was Martha and many others. The idea that yes, we can provide the platform, but you guys have to go on the stage and dance. You have to do the work. Yeah, I can put a conference together at 8 in the morning in LA, even though you live in San Bernardino, but you got to get up at 6 in the morning and drive yourself there. And if you don't do it, well, only people that were there know what happened. So you're absolutely right. I see that always. And I always saw you that no matter where the challenge was, you always found a way to do it. And more importantly, you did mention this, and I think I want to emphasize this very, very much. You've been a mentor to a lot of individuals. You've helped a lot of kids do a lot of programs. I mean, we could go a whole program just on that. Your mentorship with Martha and you, and you've impacted individuals long before you even reach this level that you're at today. You have that habit of wanting to go out and help the community. So un aplauso fuerte for that, un abrazo fuerte. I congratulate you and your entire family because again, it's bits and pieces, everybody puts it together, so you are where you are today. Felix, thank you for being a guest on our show. Felix, we're gonna have to do another show soon about technology because that's an area you were very strong in, and that we didn't even cover that area. But your strengths are just keep popping up in all directions, so I've got to go on this. But we are recognizing you within a few weeks of having received your PhD. And I say something to you, I don't know if others have said it, but I'll say it for myself. We expect you to continue doing great things. You have a lot of responsibility for our kids of the future in your hands, as well as the group that you work with. So I know we're in good hands. I feel very confident that what you're doing is great. Thank you, Felix.
Thank you, Armando. I appreciate it.